Athena told me it's my pleasure to call the meeting to order, which I'm going to do. It's 8:08. This is our Operations Committee meeting. First on business is to elect a committee chair. I've had the pleasure of serving for the past 3 years with Chase, and I think my time in the hot seat is done. So JP and Molly, you can decide amongst yourselves who's going to chair this committee.
I was just ready to nominate you.
I decline.
I'm not that bad. Pretty easy.
You don't care?
I mean, if you want to do it, it's fabulous. Why is
No.
it just the two of us?
Well,
Because
because
three
it's really
people
just
on
the
the
three of us
committee.
on the committee.
On the
It's the
committee.
only
Thank you.
choice.
So here, I guess here's my only question is, as we're going through all these other committees,
Yeah,
thinking about like charity education, you know,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm good to that.
you want to do that?
I mean, it's fine. You talked me into it on my very first
Okay.
meeting as a board person.
So I mean, I'd be willing to do this too if you want to split those duties.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay.
So Molly, you have to nominate JP.
Thank you.
Just my, I'm
I nominate
fulfilling my
JP
last
to
chair
be
duties
the
over
chair.
here.
I accept.
And then let's have a vote
All in
on
favor, yep.
JP as Operations Committee Chair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I will turn the meeting over to you.
Okay, so I guess we'll look at the minutes. Any updates or questions on the minutes from September? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to discussion items. I assume I'm going to turn this over to you folks for the middle school update.
Well, the screen is on, so can we jump to committees?
Yes, let's jump to committees. Okay. I will just say then, as chair of this committee, let's try to make it snappy.
So I had asked for this to be on the agenda because, as you all might recall, that we've had a request from other groups, Music Auxiliary, to be listed as a committee. So it was not listed because I felt that as a full board, we needed to discuss that and discuss the implications. So I'm opening it up because I have thoughts, but I didn't want my thought to cloud anybody else's desire. But I'm just gonna throw it out there. I think personally, we should not add more committees to this list. We're pretty full right now. I think with Music Auxiliary, it would be great if they could attend DPO and include any reporting out that they want us to know about, because 3 board members typically attend those meetings as there is, and they can hear updates from board members and Superintendent Degner. Thoughts on that suggestion?
I would agree, we don't go to any other
Yeah.
districts type of committees like that, so. I mean, I know we discussed all this kind of stuff, but I agree.
I wonder, I agree, 100%. Because a couple things I wonder. How do, just this number of committees we have on this list, how does this compare to other districts and boards? Like,
You're well beyond whatever.
yeah, that's what you say. It seems
Yeah.
like way over the top.
Yeah.
And
It's a lot.
it's a lot of extra work. It's for an already underpaid position. But what I wonder about the auxiliary DPO, is that like a conversation we could have with DPO? Like, could you create or even like a standing agenda item, or even a slot for them to like send a rep? Would that be the place to go with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, as you guys just talked about, right, the slope is, okay, you start attending one of those, and this is already what you're dealing with, I think, based on your level of involvement in the community, is people are asking you to come to everything, right? They want you to show up to a lot of them. And so I do think that would be appropriate for DPO. It seems like Music Auxiliary, booster clubs, those would be appropriate things for a district parent organization in a K-12 environment to be considering, right? That, okay, what are those other groups we need to pull in to be reflected there? So think we have a meeting tomorrow night unless it gets canceled, so we could even bring it up to him then.
I think what they're looking for is just an avenue for communications.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, yeah.
Yep.
All right, so folks going to DPO, maybe bring that up to them and then.
I do want to note for the recording that the first 7 of our community committees are like required that one of us participate, like the Iowa City Assessors Examining Board, just so that
Yeah.
just so that people know who
Right.
might be listening
Those
to
are
us. Some of these
required.
we actually do have to have a representative on. So in case they're like, well, why didn't you get rid of some of your committees? Some of this committee work we cannot get rid of. We have to go and participate in this,
Yeah,
just for the public.
yeah, good point.
I
What-
did have to remove myself from Johnson Faith or the Interfaith Coalition because it meets during my work schedule. I didn't know, so if anybody wants to switch with me.
When do they meet?
Anywhere between 11 and 1.
Most, and that's why it work for most of us.
Yeah, take my name off the list,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I think Charlie is.
Charlie, I think usually goes, yeah, I mean, he signed up for it, but it looked like, I don't want to take over your meeting, but Jenny had already.
Oh, the houses into homes, I talked with Lucy and Selena, I think we're just gonna delete that if you, we met a few times with them, and I don't think there's a pressing need for that, so
Okay.
we'll just delete that from the list.
Okay. Any other comments on this? Things people, questions about?
I would just say if there's things that's still on there and have openings, people can raise their hand for it, but I don't think it's required.
Like, we could have additional people at equity.
Yeah,
advisory.
but I'm
Yeah.
just saying that it's not
But, right,
required.
right, we've got one in all of them.
We do.
So that was all. Thank you.
Okay. All right, anything else on that? No? All right, do we want to go to middle school? You ready?
I will just be clicking the slides from back here, so let get you be loud.
It's not weird at all. Yeah.
Oh, great.
So tonight we're going to talk to you guys a little bit about middle school update. It's going to focus primarily on operations, construction, and then also some of the staffing that we're working through. I think I've said it to you guys before, and I know I've put in some written communication that, you know, it's probably not a surprise if you're driving through by some of these projects, you'd have some questions, right? Especially Southeast, and you know, we've heard from a staff member at Southeast too with some questions here recently. So we wanted to get Dwayne to come talk to you with Jeff about some of the construction. I know Chase is going to intro this too, so I'm probably repeating a lot of what he was planning on saying. But we wanted to talk to you about that because I think there's some real challenges for us with that August timeline and what that's going to look like in a couple of these scenarios. I'm not saying that from the standpoint that they're insurmountable, but it's probably going to take some flexibility on our end, and of course something we're going to have to monitor. So I'll let them get into more of the details and then kind of get some direction if we need it from you guys, or at least some awareness out there about what those next steps might look like. Did I take everything?
No, you didn't.
Okay,
So the only thing a couple of things I would add to what Matt said is we understand that this is a monumental lift, not only from a facilities perspective, but also from a pedagogical and curriculum perspective. And so really appreciate the work that Lucas has done, as well as Jeff and Dwayne, as we move this forward. And the way we've set this out over the last several months, if you remember, is that we brought reports to you about middle schools kind of alternating. So instruction, one update, and then facilities, the next update. So we continue to do that as we move down the path. And one of the things that we're working on is really kind of a comprehensive plan of how we're going to approach the work with timelines as we move into the spring, so that we can keep on track, because there are a number of balls in the air that we're trying to juggle as we move this forward. And so this is just one of those checkpoints for us to provide you all an update of where we are, and we're always happy to come back and talk more about the work. And while we are focused on facilities this evening and our staffing, I'm sure Lucas wouldn't mind a curriculum question too. No? Okay. But with that, we'll turn it over to Dwayne and Lucas to get us started.
So I have one request. 4 more weeks of warm weather would help. The weather's been in our favor and it's gonna continue for another week or two, they tell me, which every day will take, so we need them.
What's
So-
warm, Dwayne?
What's warm?
Yeah.
Above 30 degrees. Anything below freezing is a problem, you know, you have to protect your work, especially at night, you know, they have to cover it up, the concrete or the block or whatever. But anything during the day at 40 degrees is really, it's great. You know, give me 50, I'll take it, but
Got 50 on Friday.
yeah, so, and it's been really good. I'll start by saying that over the last few days, we've had discussions with all three principals to fill them in on where we're at, Lucas and Jeff and I. The last couple days, I've had long discussions with the actual contractors. We spent an hour and a half with one today, and now over an hour last Wednesday with another one. So we're staying in touch with them. We're getting updated schedules. We're getting good information, and like they'll be the first ones to tell you that weather. We need the weather. The other comment I'll make is that I'm old school and I always print this out in case the technology doesn't work. But it worked. So I just thought I'd start talking about each school, just a real brief and review of what the project is at North Central. And I'm doing these alphabetically for no other reason. At North Central, 2 additions, one on the east side, which is a kitchen addition expansion and a cafeteria expansion. On the west side is the classroom expansion, and there's also interior renovations. There's some interior work being done on nursing office. There's work being done on family and consumer science labs. Those are being renovated. There's some additional office space on the inside in a renovation, and there's some rooms being converted into science rooms. So there's a lot of work being done on the inside of North Central, in addition to what you see on the outside. I'll start with the east side. I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges and the project schedule for each one, so you got a feel for it. The challenges at North Central, if you recall, way last summer, maybe even spring, we talked about putting a 10-plex there because we had some site utility issues, and we weren't so sure that we could get those resolved in time to get started. But we did. We got them resolved. But we still moved the 10-plex, and the 10-plex is sitting there. And I'm not so sure we aren't going to use it. But the issue there became site issues. Everywhere we go in Iowa City, I don't know what it is about this town, the soil just doesn't work, especially when you put a heavy building on it. And when you put 2 stories on it from a school building perspective, it makes it more difficult. So we had some soil conditions there we needed to deal with, the infrastructure we needed to deal with. And then part of the challenge of this building was there's part of the second floor that's actually going up and over the existing building. If you know where the wrestling room is kind of centrally located between the classroom wing and the cafeteria and the gym, it's kind of in the middle of the building. We're actually going up and over that to create a science room up there that we need to have to meet our needs. So that was a structural engineering challenge, more time consuming than we thought it would be, but we got by it. The west addition, I'll back up. The east addition, the cafeteria addition's going well. Equipment's ready to go. We're going to move some things around. The cafeteria addition, I'll show you a picture in a second. Big 2-story addition, looks great. It's going well. The boxes are up. The other thing you're going to hear me talk about a lot is boxes. You have to think of these as boxes. And if the box is there, and once you get the lid on that box, being the roof, you can do all kinds of things inside, and you can really make up a lot of time. Okay? So it's the boxes that are key. So those 2 boxes are up. You go to the west side, the box is halfway up. And what happened today was they brought a big crane in, and we're setting a bunch of structural concrete deck on top of the lower level classrooms to create our storm shelters. Okay? So we opted to do the entire floor that way. So the entire first floor is going to be pretty darn safe. And then there'll be a concrete slab over that. Once those deck planks are in, which will be done starting tomorrow and be done by midweek, we can start on concrete. So if we get a couple more days at the end of next week, get that concrete slab poured, we're gonna be able to lay block and go up with the second floor, okay? So, the builders told me this, we met with them last Wednesday. They reassured me that they're gonna get it done. And I said, okay, tell me how you're gonna get it done. And they went through the schedule with me, and they've had to put a lot of time into it, and they've got a completion schedule for the cafeteria and kitchen, and then another one for the classrooms, and they're separate, of course. And they believe they can do it after meetings with all their subs. Now, a lot of it's weather dependent. If we go the deep freeze for a month or so, we're toast. It's gonna really hurt us. But if it's moderate temperature above, they think they can do it. But having said that, the original plan was, and some of you weren't here, would remember that we talked about getting the second floor done, and the contractors are working their way out of the building. Remember that discussion? And that we would have the top floor done before the lower level. Well, now because of what's happened with the schedule, and we're just getting to the second floor, they want to reverse that. They say they can get the first floor finished, and then we'll work our way out of the second floor. And in the meantime, those 10 rooms would be out in the 10-plex. Okay? And Colby's going to look for a couple ways to maybe create some other temporary spaces in the building. So we're still working the plan, but the huge savings, or saving grace, I guess is the word, is that 10-plex. It's there, it's up, it's hooked up, it's ready to go. And that's what we'll use it if we have to, and we intended to. I had, at one time, with the utility structure problem solved, I felt like, well, this is really picking up steam, and then we got slowed down by the subsoil. So that's that one.
Do you have an idea of how long we'd have to use the 10-plex if we have to use it, like best case and then worst case scenario?
We talked about that, and I'm thinking that the worst case would be the end of September. I think they'd be caught up. So, you're talking 6 weeks of school, and that way they can get it done, get it right, do it right, and get out of there. But 6 weeks, if you ask me today. Okay? I'll be able to tell you a lot more at the end of December or the first part of January, based on what happened with the weather. So, okay. And something they told Brady before the meeting was, we had our conversations with the builder. Oh, let me finish this. This shows you the classroom site on the west, the two top pictures. You see the first floor is there. That's not the crane. There was a bigger one brought in. On the lower left is the cafeteria expansion. The lower right is the kitchen expansion. Okay? So the boxes are going up. Is it? Yeah, go ahead,
I'd
Jeff.
like to correct one word. If it gets really bitter cold, we're not toast. It's just we have to get more creative. We'll do more tinting and more heat. I don't want to say we're toast.
For once, Jeff's more optimistic than me. We can do it, and there are ways to do it, but it's really going to make it difficult, okay? So I told Brady before the meeting, and this is something I shared with all the contractors. We don't fail here. We haven't failed, we're not going to fail, and don't think that way. You need to figure out a way to get this done, because we don't fail in Iowa City. Our students are coming, whether you want them to or not, and you damn well better be ready. And those are the words they used. So, they got the message, and they've had it more than once. So I really believe they're working to make it work. I don't think any of them are dragging. I think a lot of the issues were soil related, engineering related, and not necessarily the contractors. I wanted to say that, okay? Okay, Northwest. Of all the three, I have the most confidence, okay? And the reason is pretty simple. It's a one-story addition. It's not a two-story addition, and the one story's up. And they're about done they started on the south end, worked their way to the north. If you go out there, they're just about done with that one-story box. There's also the kitchen addition, which has had more challenges. And we're working with, and that's a production kitchen, and there's a lot of issues going on there. So a lot more challenges with that, but I think it's going to work out. So that's why I'm confident. The other part is the interior work involves updating the fitness room and some other spaces, but more particularly that old theater is being converted into 4 classrooms. And we're gonna show you a picture. It's all but done. They're getting ready to lay carpet in there. So those 4 classrooms on the inside are good, and Kimberly's pleased because she can start using them. She's talking about using them in different ways, and she'll have to work that out with Lucas, but I reassured Kimberly this afternoon that I'm not, this building gives me the least anxiety, okay? I don't worry about it much. Couple reasons. One, the box, but the quality of the contractor that's there. It's a really good, it's Knutson. They're a first-class company. They have the resources and the manpower to bring in. They've done so already, and I really feel good about it. Some of the challenges there, right off the bat, we knew we had a geothermal well field right where the new classrooms were going. So we hit about 6 of them. Was it 6, Jeff? You remember? And 6 of those wells. Unfortunately, the engineers had over-designed the geothermal well field, so there was some slack, and it didn't affect us too bad. And they're making some other adjustments with the equipment, so we didn't have to go back out and re-drill them. But at Northwest, we had to drill pier cast augering, where you actually drill holes into the ground and you fill them with concrete so you can build on top of it to stabilize the soil and support the weight of the building. Even a 1-story at Northwest, we still had the same issues that we've had at the other 2 schools. So that was an issue for us there. The existing site condition, I put it on there because if you're familiar where the project is, it's on the east side of the building. There's neighbors right there. There's neighbors like maybe less than 100 feet away. And so we got to build a retaining wall there. We got to do some grading there. A lot of that work's not going to be done until spring, but I said, that's okay. I don't care if it's not till the spring. You need to focus on the inside. They're the ones we had an hour and a half meeting with today. And I don't know, we're short on time, but if you can just hang with me a second. They showed me a timeline. Imagine the chart like a spreadsheet, okay? And here's a vertical bar that's the completion date. And here are horizontal lines that work its way down the page, okay? And those horizontal lines are like the brick lane, the roof, whatever, you know, that's called critical path. And when they first started and they got behind, we also had some permit issues there. They were telling me 6 weeks behind, 8 weeks behind. I said, ain't gonna happen, you know. So they modified it and they showed me a graph, and if I can show it to you if you're interested, but with those initial bars and the revised bars and how those bars caught up and how they now, as of today, told me that they're back on schedule. So I'm feeling pretty good about Northwest. Okay, and there you see the classrooms. Both of that one on the right's the south end, the one on the left's the north end. They're working their way up. I believe no, so it could be the other way around. But and then on the lower picture there, lower left is the kitchen. To the left of that kitchen is a cafeteria expansion. So there's 2 parts of that addition. And then to the lower right, that's one of those special ed rooms that we did in the theater. So you can look at it and see the ceiling grid's up, carpet's down on that one. So, you know, it'll be a matter of days and it's ready to occupy. Okay? So, and I expressed to Kimberly as well as Colby and Michelle that don't listen to what you hear. Ask Jeff or myself or the guys that are on the job about what's going on, because a lot of people have a lot of opinions that aren't always the best educated, okay? So that's Northwest. Any questions so far? I mean, okay.
One thing to add on that one, that kitchen renovation is a critical piece for us. Northwest is one of our production kitchens, and so Allison has been working with Jeff. We really need to get back in there as soon as possible, and so it has implications even beyond our middle school project, because that is a hub for some of the services we provide to other students in the district. So we're really trying to keep that one pushing as well. So
and she's had to use other schools to.
She's on schedule to be in there after break, and then start to ramp up, and so by the end of the month, she'll be up going where she should be the new cooler freezer are up and going, or will be up and going by then, so that's looking good.
The kitchen there, we actually renovated part of that in the last renovation, but the freezer and cooler sat outside in a plywood box, if you were familiar with it. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen it, Molly, but I said, this doesn't work, we gotta fix this. So the new addition on the kitchen is the freezer and cooler enclosed and a dry storage room. And then we're gonna go back in the other kitchen and rearrange some of in the original kitchen, rearrange some of the equipment. We did the servery a year, 2 years ago, okay? And the cafeteria's been expanded to allow for additional students, just like North Central. And they are gonna be doing some epoxy floor work in there in the next couple of weeks, so we warned Kimberly today, and Jeff warned the contractor today that they better take care of the fumes, because there's some fumes that come off. So we hope we don't get any complaints, but that's one of the two things that are going on there. And it's critical to get that floor done in the kitchen, so. Anything else in Northwest, yeah? Okay. Like I said, we're feeling good about it. Even though you may not look good to you, it's okay. That roof's gonna be on there in no time. All the bar joists for the roof are there, ready to go. Cranes are coming. They have a storm shelter as well, and that's going on this week too. So there's some concrete deck going over 2 rooms that are the rated storm shelter at that building. Southeast. So southeast, there's basically three additions. The east addition has a band room, a music room, an art room, an industrial tech room, industrial type drafting, CAD drafting room, or career tech room I should call it, a fitness room, and 2 locker rooms. That's a mouthful right there, just for one part of that project. But it's the part that's way ahead. If you go out there on the east corner, if you drive over there between the school and Mercer, that addition's up. And well, I'll show you the picture in a second. They're working on the inside, okay? They're waiting on windows right now. They're plywooded up, but it's moving right along, and it was a big addition. We got on it first and got going. On the west side of the building, which is the one everybody's a little goosey about right now, and I'm not going to lie to you, it needs to get a lot of work to get caught up. But that particular part of the building had some real issues with the soil, maybe some of the worst we've had. But there was also some engineering data that was wrong, and some of the engineering had to be redone. That was a delay. There was a delay in getting the permit, and I'm just pointing out challenges. This is what happened. This is why it wasn't the builder's fault. And with the engineering and re-engineering and the soil conditions, and then the contractor, this is on the contractor, we dug those footings, those pier footings to build on top of. There's a couple hundred of them out there. And the concrete test came back as inadequate. And by that, we take a cylinder about the size of Eliza's cup there, maybe a little bigger. And when they pour concrete out there, they fill it with concrete. And that cylinder goes to the lab. And it sits there for 28 days or longer. And they put compression on that cylinder. And if it breaks before it reaches a certain rating, and typically it's 3,500 pounds per square inch, if it breaks, then it isn't curing out or is an inadequate strength. Okay? So we were in a tizzy. The contractor said, what do we do? I said, well, in my day, concrete that's in the ground cures out different than concrete that's above the ground in air in a cardboard tube. Can't we just test what's in the ground and see if it's curing out different than what's in the lab? Oh, yeah, we could do that. So I'm going to show you a picture in a minute. That's exactly what we did. We went out there and put pressure and weight on those pier footings, and by God, it passed. Now they're off to the races, okay? So now they're pouring their footings, and the footings are done. And what they're started today or late today or early tomorrow is they're going around the perimeter of that building, and they're going to lay 2 courses of concrete block. They got all the gravel in there and all the plumbing, everything's there, and they're going to use that block to form up the concrete floor. That's why I say we need a few more days, people. you know, even if they get it down, and we don't want the ground to freeze, so they'll protect it. If they get it down, they can cover it up and keep it warm for a few days. We'll be okay, okay? Then they can go up with the block. The thing is, it's 2 stories of block. So again, the contractor has looked at his schedule and he also brought in another mason today. So there's 2 masonry contractors on the project. We had one there working, a little slow, but he got the other side done. So now we have two different contractors on that west side, okay? So that's gonna help. There's also, before I forget it, there's a small addition. It's a 2-classroom, I think 2-classroom addition, up on what I call the far west end, towards, well, the northwest corner of the building. There's a special ed 1-story addition going there. Not gonna be a problem, okay? So there's 3 additions. The interior work, there is some interior work where the current shop, and if you're familiar with the current shop and current art room are, they're gonna move into their new space, okay? And actually, the old band room is being renovated into their space, okay? And then there's a new band and music being added. So they're gonna move, and once they move, all those walls get torn out, and it becomes a huge open commons area that opens into the cafeteria. So if you're familiar with it, it's really gonna be kind of cool when they get done. All right, so that's the scope of the work, but I kind of got off the track here. But so anyway, I talked about the challenges. The challenge moving forward is getting caught up, fighting the weather. Oh, I love you, Dean. Yeah.
It's a good forecast, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good.
37, 44, 50, 50, 47, 48, 38, 41, 47, 50.
That's good.
Thanks. Make my day. So that all helps, you know, to get out of the ground, get that floor poured, get it going. There was something else I wanted to say about that addition. Well, we can go, I guess we can go to the next page. They're working on the temporary housing. It became apparent a few weeks ago that, hey, we got to come up with a plan. Michelle and Lucas and I had a very frank conversation last week. And that, if you know Michelle. But we got to come up with, and we don't have a plan yet. We don't have it in writing. We're still working on it. But we've got modulars sitting around the district. You know, we've got a couple, well, I won't say where, we threw a bunch of them around that we've used. Some of them are going to be empty, okay? Elementary and high school, that we are going to have to pull together and create a modular farm, for lack of a better word. And the best place for it, I was out there looking the other day, I think it's between the east end of the building where that last addition was and Mercer. Before you go up towards the street there, it's kind of a flat spot there. And I think we can put some modulars there. So, but we don't know for sure. There's a geothermal well field out there. There's all kinds of things going on. So we have some property that might work. But for me to sit here and tell you that we won't need to use some modulars when school starts next year, I couldn't do it, you know. And I try not to pull your leg, okay? But the goal is maybe to get one floor done there and then have one floor like we talked at North Central. We may get to that point. That's the optimistic view of what's going on, okay?
If you do have to do mods at Southeast, do you think it's the same, like 6-week into September timeframe?
Oh, maybe a little more.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't, because they're not near caught up to where North Central is, so it may be a few weeks more.
But a few weeks, not.
I'm not talking
6 months.
months, I'm talking weeks.
But the current schedule is being done on
Yes.
August 1st.
Yeah. Current
So-
schedule, no
Yeah.
mods.
I honestly think that they'll probably be done on August 30th, which means it messes with us. It messes with us moving in furniture, it messes with getting teachers in there, a lot of things. So you gotta be prepared to put them out there until you can get the inside run done, okay? That upper left-hand picture is the new music and band area, okay? Like I said, they're waiting on the windows and getting ready to start brick out there soon. And that's why they hired another masonry contractor. So one can do block on one side and one can do brick on the other. The upper right hand is the inside of that room, okay? And the lid's on. And when the lid's on, you feel pretty good. It'll be done, okay? Lower left-hand picture is kind of looking from First Avenue back towards the building. It's hard to see anything. Foundations are in. You see a lot of yellow vests. There's a lot of guys out there working, okay? Lower right, I threw in there just yesterday, I think it was. I said, I'm going to talk about putting pressure on those footings to make sure it works. And where you're looking at is something you don't see very often. We took these heavy, heavy steel beams and put them on top of those footings and tested them. And there's gauges involved with all this to test those to see if they would collapse under pressure. And that's the actual test, to test those piers. And it may not interest you, but I really like it. It's one of those things where it turns Dwayne on, man, look at stuff like that. And so that's what we did, and that's how they tested it. And there's some steel plates there. It's kind of complicated. The engineers figured it out, but thank God it worked. And that's where we're at, folks. I guess I'd answer any questions you might have, or do you want to move on?
Can you just clarify for me again for Southeast, it sounds like the addition where more of the common areas like the band and the art, fitness, that part you're
It'll all be
anticipating that will be ready. But what again is in the west
Just
addition? So the classroom, okay.
That's the need for the modulars then, Jane,
Yeah,
because we'll
yeah.
need to.
The heartburn
Yeah.
for Michelle is that there's a lot of new science rooms there. So you may have to flip some curriculum or something to make it work. But,
How many modulars are you looking at?
well, there's 20
Or
new
classroom.
there's 20 classrooms, so I don't know, anywhere from.
We have up to 9 classrooms that we can bring in.
But how many classrooms, let's say it goes to plan, how many classrooms are you short August?
Well, again, we can do like.
I don't know that we have that finalized yet, Mitch, and I think part of that is, we're having this conversation here with you guys, but, Scott's here from Southeast, right? So I'm going to pick on him. As we communicate with staff too, I think they're wanting to know what that plan is and what that looks like. And so that's part of the work, is to engage with Michelle and her team and say, okay, if we're not going to have classrooms, then what spaces do we have? What does that look like? Similar to how Dwayne talked about that with North Central. So, we are short a substantial number of classrooms. I think if I recall right, that's a lot of the idea where they planned on putting the 6th graders. And so we do have to look at some contingency plans for that, and I think get people to prepare for, hey, this is what it might look like for the first trimester. And then if we over-deliver and we're able to have some of that wrapped up, good. But I think to give you hard and firm numbers, I wouldn't want to do that yet, because I think some of that engagement still has to happen with those building teams.
That was part of the heartburn I gave Michelle, was we got to figure it out. We're going to have to work together, so it's a challenge, but Matt's absolutely right, we don't know. We're still counting the modulars we own.
I think the thing we would want to leave you with is we have no plans of delaying anything, right? And so I know that's been some of the things that have been out there, or questions you guys have been asked. We are going ahead with middle schools next fall, not doing anything different because of the budget. We're not doing anything different because of the construction. Will some of it maybe be a little bumpy in the fall as we start? Yes. And I think that's some of the work that we're going to have in front of us here the second half of the year.
So I would like
Talk
to,
us about why we have to do that, man.
Why we have to do what?
Not postpone this for another year. But go ahead with putting kids in.
We don't have to do anything, Charlie.
Okay.
But I think our recommendation is that we would continue to go ahead with it. And I think that's,
Just explain a little bit about why that's a recommendation, so, we can understand.
well, I think that's some of the sentiment I've heard from you guys as well, right? That would be the preference, is that we would go ahead with middle schools, and just in some basic one-on-one conversations we have. But for us as well, we've accounted for it in our budget planning process, even as we've considered knowing we're going to have to do some additional reductions. Most importantly, not to go back too much to what Dwayne said at the beginning, but in Iowa City, we've told people this is the plan. We've told them we have 5th graders, I think, in our elementary buildings that are excited to come, right? And teachers have been telling them every day since the beginning of the year, you're going to go to the middle school next year. And so I just think from a, climate culture standpoint, yes, I understand that 2 months or a month, in less than desirable, construction space isn't great, but I think the climate culture hit to trying to walk that back with our community be really difficult at this point. We've done the programming work, we've built classes, teachers are going to be involved in that work, we've done the hiring. I mean, I just think there's a lot of elements there that wouldn't make sense for us to turn around and walk away from because we might be with incomplete spaces for 6 weeks.
So it sounds like you're thinking the kids can handle the spaces because we'll have the rest of it.
Well, we have good evidence of working through construction spaces before, right? I mean, we've been doing this for 10 years in the district where we do construction. Now this one's a little bit more large scale on a couple of these projects, but I mean, I do think that's something that our staff and students have been great about working through is we continue to upgrade our spaces knowing that there's a transition time. And again, same here in this one. We know it's going to be complete at some point, right?
When we did Lucas, we had a 10-plex and a 6-plex.
I'll tell you anecdotally, Charlie, with a fifth grader at home, I think it would be devastating to not go to middle school. The whole school year has been, you are going, and this is the last time you're doing this and this bench and to set them back and keep them, while the curriculum obviously would be different, it would be like just redoing your fifth grade. And I think that it would impact that fifth grade class just as much as COVID did.
And for much more adversity than having to be in a temporary classroom.
Again, this is my daughter and her friends. They don't care that they're in temporaries. In fact, they sometimes think it's fun because they get to walk outside and move between buildings, and you kind of feel like you're on a college campus instead of so I think who's concerned about the temporaries are the school admins that have to deal with that level of controlled chaos and the parents. But I think for the kids, they would be devastated to be told, you're staying at your school for another year.
So if you don't,
I also think, even for our teachers that will be in a temporary space, knowing that it is temporary and that it's for a short period of time. Brady, you correct me if I'm wrong, they can deal with something temporary. Being married to an art teacher that was on art for a cart for a year, was able to deal with that, knowing that at the end of this, I get a brand new space that's all mine.
Yeah, I think the uncertainty is challenging. And probably, I'm not in any of those schools, and so I don't see it and, feel it and, live like the staff would do. But I think there is, probably just, we're hoping for good weather, obviously, all the things Dwayne said, and I think that would help. But I wouldn't, I think, the temporary part of it, I think probably everybody has legitimate questions about, what's the definition of temporary? And that's just the reality of it.
So the definition at this point is one trimester.
Dwayne said 6 weeks for Central. That's why I
Yeah, late
asked,
on me,
right?
Lisa.
That's recorded.
I think Brady's point about the uncertainty is what's difficult, and I think, one lesson maybe we learned from the budget stuff is the best we can do to reduce that uncertainty, the better. I was actually talking to Director Finch about this week that, after break, it might make sense to come out and just do a video for middle school folks, right, for those affected, and to say, hey, this is what we're looking at, right, this is what's in front of us, and try to reduce that. Because I do think there's a little fixation on some of the construction right now, which is ultimately out of all of our control, right? Dwayne and Jeff and the guys working on actual projects, and Mother Nature with the weather, right? But all of us fixate on that. Well, what can we try to tell them about? Here's what's realistic to expect. Here's what we can engage you with in work and preparing, because we have plenty of that to do, right? From a programming, teaming aspect, all of those things too, the second half of the year. But just to try to connect some dots and remove some uncertainty for people, I think is our next best step to say, here's what we're looking at, right? And then we'll get them focused where we can.
so
I
two
think the
quick
videos
comments.
are really, really good.
What's
not
that?
only a video, but a hype video for
Yeah.
the kids.
Yeah.
Just saying that because you just heard that the kids are getting excited.
I don't think the kids need a hype video.
No.
Right?
They're fine. They're
The
hype.
buildings will do a lot of that. I know
Yeah.
when they bring them in for registration and pieces like that, the buildings do some great work with
And it
that
might
too.
mean I need to
Yeah.
go out and visit with the staffs in those schools and reassure them what's going on. I don't mind doing that if that's what it takes, but two quick comments. One, to follow up on Jane's question. The reason the shops and the band room, all that needs to be done is because we're gonna tear the other ones out and they have to move. So the goal is that those rooms will be done
Right.
before summer,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, I'm not questioning
Yeah.
your your
Well, I just
ordering
wanted
of
to-
events. I was just trying to better understand what the picture was gonna look
Yeah.
like when school started.
Yeah.
So those areas should be finished.
Yeah.
Okay. And, so that bar graph that you talked about
Yeah.
with North Central,
Yeah, I'll show it
how
to you.
often can we get updates on what that
Well,
bar graph looks
I
like
get
for
them every couple
Southeast
weeks.
and- Okay. Can the board get updates
Yep,
on
I'll share
that?
it.
Okay.
Matt, he can share it.
Okay, great.
The other comment is, I have had real discussions with the builders. And I honestly believe that they're doing the best they can. That they're looking for creative ways to make it work. They're not dragging their feet. They really want to make it work for everybody. And several of them have kids that'll be in the buildings. Particularly at Northwest, that contractor's kid's gonna be in that building. Some of them in City, I know have kids in that building. The Mason's kids coming. So they really are trying. And I think, because I was a builder, the last thing I'd want to do, say, hey buddy, you got an extra year to finish this project. Doesn't work. It's not a good plan. So we need to just keep pushing.
So Dwayne, before we promise that line graph, when I'd asked you for those updates throughout the fall
Uh-huh.
different times, each of those contractors provided a different format of
Yes,
update though.
they're all three
The
different.
nice fancy one you were talking about, that wasn't at Southeast, was it?
No, that was
That
the
was
North
North
Central was, no, the
North
fancy
Central?
one was, the better ones are Southeast, Northwest. The least desirable one is North Central because it's just a huge spreadsheet.
Right. So I'm just saying, if I start turning around these, you guys are gonna look a little different on each project about how they're trying to show us getting back on schedule.
Well, that part to me, it's gonna happen when it happens, it's out of our control. We know that these facilities are great when they're done, so maybe it's a good time to pivot to the stuff that I think, like when I read that email, the more anxiety is, I see the hiring here, but then programming, I think, is where people are like, wait, are we really gonna be ready programmatically? So is this a good time to shift to?
It's a great segue. So I'm going to turn it over to you here in just a little bit, but what you see up there, this is a great teaching strategy because there's a lot of text on there. I apologize. But kind of go through this timeline, we've stuck pretty true to it since September when we did our first round of hiring. I'm going to let Nick kind of speak to that first here and then kind of pick up from there.
Great. Yeah, so we did our first round early in September. We've kept moving. We want to make sure we have high quality educators in whatever space is available. So we have to work through this process because we have 42 teachers currently in our elementary schools teaching 6th grade. We need to have a game plan then for what that looks like going forward. So we actually had interviews early on in September, moved 25 teachers into positions, so they're already tied to our middle schools already. And there's a kind of a planning team that's from those hires that are participating in meetings that Lucas is helping lead. And then the survey part, I'll let Lucas speak to that more in a little bit because that's related to the programs, electives, and how we ended up where we're at. Currently, if you look, we have postings out already for more 6th grade positions, so that way we can continue to fill up our teams. And then we have positions for ELL and special education because we want to make sure, a lot of times ELL and special education get assigned to roles. We wanted to let individuals, if they really want to be in a middle school, have an opportunity to express their interest in being in the middle schools and interview for a position like anyone else. So we felt like that was an important aspect that we wanted to make sure was in place. And then we're getting ready to post some positions for next year already related to industrial technology and family and consumer science because, well, finding those individuals are very difficult. We have some industrial technology teachers retiring as well, so that adds to our challenge beyond the middle schools. So we'll begin some of those up and then we'll begin working through some other areas that we know are going to be hard for us to fill as we go forward. And then this spring, just as part of our overall hiring process, we kind of just that final movement that we need to have between our elementaries and middle schools to get our staff in order. So we make sure we have all the people we need to make sure we're covering the classes in our middle schools and then our elementaries are staffed where they need to be staffed as we work through that process. So it's just one of those, this will be a kind of a challenging puzzle that we'll have to work through and work with the team, work with teachers in the admin on to help make that happen. So that's the general timeline. And then the next slide just quickly is where we're at. So, we anticipate needing teams of 15 at Southeast and Northwest, and North Central would have 4 teams of 3 to have 12. You can see where we're at. Northwest did have 9, but then one teacher took advantage of the early retirement, so they're now down to 8. So the slight adjustment there, so we'll start working on building up those teams going forward.
Eliza, can you jump back one slide?
Yeah.
The other back. There you go. No, one more. There, thanks. JP, to your point, I mean, right, we talked about tonight that we're going to talk about staffing from kind of an operations standpoint, but that idea that you're talking about programmatically, we know from the employee life cycle, it's not just about hiring people. And even though these are internally, what we can bring back in the spring is how we're going to do that, working with the schools as we onboard these teachers, right? Because we're onboarding onto a new setting. Then we have to develop them. Then we have to engage them. And that's not just the teachers that are going from a fifth grade experience or an elementary experience into a middle school experience. It's also our junior high teachers that are then going to now be in this middle school concept. And so we are conscious of that climate and culture piece, building that resilience of our staff as they take on these challenges, and knowing we have that additional background of the construction, but trying to keep that noise at bay so that we can start to develop our teachers into this new realm they're going to be in. And I'm going to point to Scott too, that Matt already said, but it is truly working with those teams and what do they need to be successful. And so that is also a part of that underlying cycle that when we have our next kind of report, we can bring back and talk about that piece, that the rest of that cycle of how we engage and support our employees.
Yeah, and speaking of that engagement, this last week, it was last Thursday, I think, we had our first middle school planning team, which consisted of our administrators, counselors, the core planning team, which was one team of 3 teachers that they hired. So we actually had, roughly about 6 to 7, 8 members from each building there, kind of going through the big picture of what middle school is going to look like. Knowing that we've got a broader spectrum of people that we need to get engaged, just as Chase had mentioned just a little bit ago. So the key is to have these meetings much more frequently. So we did it on a Thursday, just giving the big pictures. So what we did, and I asked for them to do, we kind of truncated it in different portions. Here's a few pieces of information, discuss as a team. What are things that you see as positives, what we just discussed? What are questions that you have or that when you take back to your building you're going to have? So that's a document that we're going to continually come back. One thing I asked each of our junior high principals right now is before we head into break, let's make sure we can get a meeting on the calendar to discuss those questions right now so break doesn't happen, we totally forget about those. So we're constantly generating those questions knowing that that information then is going to have to get taken back to the building. And like the conversation about a video, yes, we need to get that broader message that's out. The short answer is 7th and 8th grade, yes, we'll be in a middle school structure. 3rd day technically doesn't look a whole lot different than what it looks like now. The big change is having those 6th graders back in the building and ultimately knowing what that climate culture is then going to have the impact. Because it doesn't take just 6th grade teachers to create the climate culture for those students, it's the entire building. And that's going to be extremely important moving forward. Identify what those barriers or the barriers that they see so we can start making sure that we're very conscious of that with the planning. The planning piece, I feel very confident about where we're at. Now it's getting the people in the positions and communicating that message to a broader audience. Because one of the things that I could see that we have done a little bit better, bringing people on board a little bit earlier. So people aren't just, they're hearing things and then they take it with whatever direction they did. So one of the things I kind of cautioned our team with, I'm going to share the slides with you. If you choose to share that with people, that's fine. But people, when they're shared slides without the message behind it, they start to create their own assumptions, right? So that was one thing I cautioned with, but also the fact that you're going to get asked questions, and that's why you're here to help answer them. I'm glad you guys mentioned kind of the program of studies. I just want to highlight that very quickly. Before we went on Thanksgiving break here, we did survey. We had just over 1,530 students in our current 7th and 8th grade classrooms that were surveyed about potential electives that they'd like to see in the building. We have not changed course offerings for quite a while with the electives at the junior high level.
You say you have 1,500?
1,532. Yeah. I think, it's probably been updated. Some kids probably saw it in their inbox that they forgot about. But roughly just over 1,530. So these were the results we had. And, if you have a middle school kid, should try to get them to express interest. It's something that's sometimes very difficult. So that's why I kind of extended it to slightly interested, interested, and very interested. So you kind of see those top results. Personal finance is I was startled by that one. Very, very surprised, but that's great, right?
Smart kids.
So looking at those top results and then looking into those bottom. Now, when we do a program of studies, just like we've done for years, we've got offerings, right? And then ultimately comes down to students selecting those offerings. It doesn't make sense if only 6 kids are interested in stop motion animation. We can't offer our class of 6. So then we have to be creative with our scheduling and what that ultimately looks like. But just as you all mentioned, I'm glad you see the same thing that I do. we're finally getting student voice on this. And, you know, I hope in addition to keeping the classes that we have in the building as electives, we're now coming back to them and saying, these are the classes we want. And how can we make that happen with the exposure to a lot of different career pathways that we'll see in high school.
How are you giving teachers time, well, I guess I should wait a second. How are you giving teachers time
Yeah.
to create all those courses and et cetera?
Yeah, first and foremost was to make sure we involved our curriculum coordinators. So they were involved in the process that they either discussed with the teachers or that they have come up with discussions. What have you wanted to teach for years that you haven't been able to? So those questions came up. Some of these classes themselves are, the term CAN curriculum sounds terrible because that just means anybody can come in and do it. A lot of these curriculums are already created or that they exist in other fashions and it's just modifying them from there. So we'll be working, you know, we had a meeting, Carmen and I had a meeting with curriculum coordinators last week that has the impact of this classroom, looking at our CT, our world language, our music, and our art staff, which is where the majority of those electives are, to make sure that they're well aware in advance of that work will continue this winter and the spring to create those courses. It's not only those courses, but then we can take those courses that are there right now in a trimester fashion, 60 days, and to modify them down to scope and sequence to 45.
So what you said spring, winter and spring, what about summer? Like giving folks some time to come in?
We'll be done. Everything's gonna go smoothly by
Super
now.
optimistic. I'm wondering if we decide we need to do that, maybe the earlier we could tell teachers like, hey, we could use you for 10 days this summer or whatever. So like by spring break, folks know, hey, you know, because my guess would be some teachers would be like, please, I want to come in and develop this,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, we know there's gonna be TQ time that we're gonna have to spend
Okay, yeah.
this winter, this spring. I
Okay.
would love, you can get people during the school year, right? They hate
Yeah.
being out of their classrooms, but we've got more of an impact with as much of our employees as possible. Summer becomes very difficult, so we'd love to, I would not feel comfortable or sleep very well if we don't have a lot of that curriculum already designed before the summer. But we know there's, you know, it's gonna trickle in there, it's just gonna
Yeah, because
happen.
there could be room for some teacher leaders or some teaching folks to help hammer out some of those details. You know, the earlier they would know, the better.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about what the staffing is going to look like for like music and art and library? Will we be adding FTE for that, or what's that going to look like?
Yeah.
It depends, I mean, it depends on the area, and some of the things we, like, the ones you just mentioned, we're currently offering in 6th grade now, so there'll just be some transition of staff, because as you think about 3 times a week, they're seeing general music, or they're seeing their art teacher for, you know, essentially 2 sections, because it's a double period, or whatever it might be, so it'll be just some transition staff to be able to cover a lot of those. The areas that we'll end up looking, that we'll have to add in are kind of some of these more unique electives that we have, that we know, and we kind of anticipate that ahead of time, so that's why we're really looking at the industrial tech, some of those career tech ed positions, that's where we'll have a need that we'll need to add into. But everything else will probably kind of even itself out relatively.
And library staff, will that stay constant or?
I mean, that's been the
Okay,
plan
don't-
thus far, yeah.
Okay.
Quick follow-up question. So with that transition of those PE, and if they're currently teaching that now, have they been given the option to raise their hand if they want to move up, or is that something that's coming?
I think that, well, the process always, specials, it always looks different every year because we always have just changing of numbers and everything, so it's kind of an ongoing conversation. So we'll work with those coordinators and we'll work with those teams and look at those pieces. A lot of times the teachers end up, because it just looks different, that they may say, I've always wanted to be at this particular level. The part we'll have to figure out is just how much, right? So we have a number of, especially in the areas you just mentioned, they're shared between 2 buildings. You know, that's not many of our elementaries. I know, in some cases we get to 3.
We
You
do
know,
that.
and as we look at this, I mean, it's going to be, as our elementaries also get smaller, there will be less times where a special teacher would be there only at a full day. I mean, that only occur in our larger elementaries where that's the case. So a lot of times we'll have people that will need to be shared. That's one of the challenges that we'll have to face too, is just having less students in the
It's a math problem in a lot of ways. I mean, we've done it before. When you start, now you've broadened the number of secondary, you know, sections you have basically. And it does become a math problem because they teach different lengths of time and what constitutes 1.0 or PE. shifts and what prep time looks like.
And it won't just be looking at the elementaries, and we'll end up looking at other certifications and different things, you know, as we talk about personal finance as an interest in our junior highs. Well, it's not necessarily a requirement now in our high schools, so we're seeing less students take that, so that may be something that ends up being, you know, things that we have to work through and just look at our overall staffing picture. And that's the unique puzzle that we're gonna be working through throughout this spring, and just trying to make sure, you know, each and every one of these things are taken care of. And one thing I was gonna mention is, Lucas talked about the electives piece, then we did the cross-check to the BEDS report to make sure we knew exactly what the certification is that they would have to teach those courses. So that way we feel well prepared to be able to make sure we're in a good spot for that as well.
And obviously you see right now, just that general sixth grade position is posted. We don't specify by subject. We'll be doing interviews right after the first of the year. We have an ELL and a special ed position that's posted right now as well. That doesn't mean just one position is going to be needed. Right now, we're working with our ELL coordinator as well as our special ed director to kind of go through what are the numbers we're looking at, what's the current staffing, and what do we need for staffing to make that happen so the students are better at the program.
That's a good point in specials though. I do think, we'll just make sure to follow up, just so they can say like, are you interested? Because it's a big different thing. It's just like, I appreciate with ELL and special ed that we're saying, are you interested? Because a lot of times it is just like, you do just get assigned, you know, and so I think that's the encouragement.
One of the things I've been kind of pondering and trying to work through about curriculum at our middle schools is, I love the program of studies and on all the electives that we put out there. But there are differences between the middle schools. You know, like Southeast has Castle and Northwest and North Central don't do that. And there were a couple other ones that I noticed were offered there. Can you guys walk me through how that works with HRS? And I thought with HRS, part of that was kind of streamlining so that every student would have the same experience if they were at, you know, City or Liberty or Penn or Wickham, but that it would be similar. Is the long-term plan to streamline the electives and get all the more similar, or are we going to continue to have diverse offerings dependent on what's the particular building is interested in?
Yeah, so let me try to answer that as best as possible without a non-answer for you. I don't think we necessarily make promises, right? But level 3 states a guaranteed Bible curriculum that we have a very similar experience for students across our district, no matter what school they go to. I want to come back to Brady's question earlier, or his statement earlier that said, teachers work best when they have a team of people. It would be malpractice for a teacher just to be the only teacher in the district that teaches that class. It's not fair to them that they don't have anybody to collaborate with. So I think as we look through these, obviously, what might be a high interest for students at North Central might be different than Northwest and Southeast. I think our optimal goal is we have very consistent offerings because of the fact we're creating curriculums, we want people to partner and collaborate with one another. But, you know, I think, again, our goal is for that. I can't say that that interest then is going to determine the number of sections of that, or if we just say, you know what, across our district, that's not a high interest class, we don't offer it, or we stagger when it is offered. So I would love to say that that is our goal.
Yeah, no, and that's what I think I hear you
Yeah.
saying, is that's the goal, is to kind of work towards a
Yeah.
more consistent experience across all of our buildings.
Were some of those courses just artifacts of someone taught the class 3 years ago, they still teach it, or?
Yes, that's what I was going to add, Mitch, that it's kind of like when we were looking for electives, basically this was a class that they could create and they could stand up based on either certifications or interest of the staff member, and then I think we're slowly trying to, you know, funnel that together just as they talked about.
Some of that is a byproduct of us saying, yeah, we want to empower people to try innovative things.
Yeah.
And sometimes those innovative things that start out small really blossom and grew, and then we have a really good problem. Like, okay, now what do Castle's, I think, a great example of that. That was really a culture of saying yes, like let's try this. It's really innovative, and it really, you know, it did.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So then it's just a question of, all right, how do you replicate the same experience or comparable experience without losing the ability of the system to say, yeah, we want to empower people, not just do the same thing that they've done every year. And if there's some short-term inconsistencies, that's okay, because it can benefit the system. But it does create, I think, those gaps that that we probably see.
And I want to say that's the flip is true. Like, I'm not saying if we have an outlier, then they don't get to teach anymore.
Yeah,
If we have an outlier and it's a wildly successful
Exactly.
program, how can we
Right.
take it to the other buildings
Exactly.
and bring it up? Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, when we talk about our care team Bible, we really want to make sure our core is there. because you all have to take that. So, and if you're transferring between schools, you know, language arts, social studies shouldn't be dramatically different, but we could have, there's just a lot of interest in this niche elective at this school and maybe not at this school. I mean, I think it's just a work in progress. You know, but GVC at its heart, core is gonna get there. And then I think we deal with these outliers.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, that if we haven't, I know Luke's didn't mention it, but that probably underlies a lot of that is the connection to the career pathways. And you don't see it necessarily in the program of studies as it exists right now, but Lucas, Carmen, Eliza, and their teams have worked just a massive number of hours to really say, okay, how do we connect these career pathways, and which is a high board priority, obviously, with career pathways. And some of the things we're going to be able to do, partnering with, you know, community college, getting students. I think that's been a constant conversation across the district, is how do we get students more interested in career pathways at their junior high, now middle school. And that's sort of been very intentional work. And so, you know, if you were to see those electives that are up there, I mean, they're all very directly connected to career pathways. And that's, you know, not just by happenstance. Even the options kids really had to choose from, you know, were built that way. And I think that's going to be, I think, something that's very, you know, good for the system, good for kids, families, community partners.
All right, what else do we have? Obviously, there's a lot of open-ended things, but it's also 9:15. We have one more topic to talk about.
Yeah.
We do have one more topic.
It'll be short.
It'll be
Really
short.
short, yeah.
Anything else? Okay, so can we move on? Are we ready? Is Edmund, you guys ready to move on to?
This is the good old days of having committee meetings after the
Should,
board
like,
meeting.
take it.
Yeah, back to the.
Real effective right now. Yeah. I'm sure you're getting our best. Yeah.
I heard about that.
I can't either.
Yeah.
But with that, and I know probably our best thinking isn't going to happen in the next 5 minutes, and certainly not after that.
This will take 2, maybe.
So are we
Maybe
ready? to move
5.
on?
Okay, yeah, so this one's on me, sorry, I'll keep you here for 5 minutes longer. This was just an idea that I took from the IASB convention this year, a session that I attended, put on by Spencer Community School District. It was a literacy program that they put on involving their community, and that the impetus for this was their lower achievement scores in reading. And so they wanted to make reading important. And they created a hashtag Spencer Reads, and they had all of these different things that they did along with their community. You know, for example, they would have these days where for 15 minutes at a specific time, everybody in their community would read. They would stop what they were doing and they would read. And granted, this is a small community. It's hard to compare. And then they would post about it on social media. The board actually, at the end of their board meetings, they would go around and talk about the book that they're currently reading. I'm not suggesting that we do that, but these are just some ideas. They had book exchanges at athletic events and just really elevating the idea of reading and lifelong learning. And it's also, you know, it's a PR thing. So, Kristen, I'm glad you're here because this is the type of thing that elevates the district. And I thought, you know, this is Iowa City. We are a UNESCO City of Literature. What could we do where we involve the, you know, the UNESCO folks, the community libraries, our teacher librarians, you know, and just the community, and just elevating this idea of reading. And it's also kind of a nice spin, you know, to pivot on everything else that's going on with books in our society. So to talk about it in a positive way and to kind of capitalize on that. So I actually talked with Ruthina earlier that I think maybe this might be something that the DPO might want to take up. And so maybe I could, you know, talk with them tomorrow at their meeting, because this sounds like a good thing, you know, maybe a nice project for them, because it would involve PTO work, and that would be the district-wide coordination. But Ruthina wanted to put it on the agenda tonight after I discussed it with her, so I'll just open it up if anybody has any comments or questions or ideas.
I don't want to belabor too long. I think it's great. I think it could be a really fun thing, really exciting thing. This, I mean, this is the city to do this in. We are the city's literature in the United States. So I love it. I don't know where to go with that to make it sort of a big fun thing, but it sounds like a pretty small lift for probably pretty big impact that is really positive.
Right, big
Could we
bang for
make
the buck.
it, could
Yeah.
we make it into a read band books?
Read band books.
I agree, starting with DPO to see what their interest would be, and even suggesting that, you know, they could reach out to John Kenyon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Put together a little like community group that would help spearhead this with, sounds like the board, whatever we can do to.
There are some PTOs that have done this. When I was the principal at Levy, there is a program that's a community-based literacy. And so there are several buildings that have had experience of doing it successfully.
That are already doing it, and then maybe we.
I don't know if
can
they're
get-
still, but
Okay.
have done it at some point. So there's a structure about
Right,
how,
yeah.
it's usually like a month long
Okay.
is what they'll do. And so there is some different things that
Just to kind of expand on that and make this a district-wide.
Maybe the library folks could weigh in with some ideas to, yeah. So you're gonna bring in DPO and then maybe from there just see where else it can go to get support. Great. Next, any other questions or comments on that? All right, next ops committee meeting,
January 9th.
January 9th.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
Yes.
And we'll do that 5 o'clock.
I don't know, I just.
We got you.
No excuse for anyone to be
Think about what book you're reading.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second.